And we're back at home, but not in the studio, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Saturday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, it is time for a more lighthearted episode. This has obviously been not the most upbeat and joyful week. Just being around the days leading up to the days after 9/11 usually puts many of us in a somber mood. And obviously the Charlie Kirk situation, which people online are completely, there is always going to be a lot of arguing and vigorous disagreement. It doesn't have to be politics. I've seen people almost come to blows over fatty acid metabolism. You can't believe what people are willing to raise hands over. I really shouldn't judge, because I was the kind of kid, I was ready to fight because I thought the Yankees were better than the Mets when I was 11 years old. I should sit all of that out. You know what I mean? But I want to have a more lighthearted episode. But the irony is, we're going to talk about baseball again. And right now, there are Met fans preparing to jump off of the Brooklyn Bridge. If I'm exaggerating, I'm not exaggerating by much. The thing with baseball that I always come back to, and if you follow the channel, if you've heard me talk baseball, talk a little Yankees, even though I'm not a Met fan, but I certainly can appreciate the history, good, bad, and ugly of the New York Mets. Baseball is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It is a 162-game season. Except in rare occurrences like the 1998 Yankees, who started off 1-4. They started off 1-4. But if we were to rewind the clock to the first part of April of 1998, you had Yankee fans, my team, my guys, my fellow Yankee fan lunatics. Now, I was never this kind of absurd. But after that 1998 Yankee team started off 1-4. The phone lines to WFAN lit up. Torrey's got to go. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Brian Cashman, who's that? He's got to go. Steinbrenner's got to sell a team because they had not won the previous year. They kind of fucked up. They blew the postseason. They should have beaten the Cleveland team. They did not. They lost a tough series. Mariano's not a real closer because he gave up a home run to Sandy Alomar Jr. He's not a real closer. We should have re-signed Wetland. No, I'm glad we didn't. But at 1-4, you would have thought that it was the Jets at 1-4, and there's, at the time, only 11 games left, and we're not even going to make the postseason. The Yanks were only 157 games left. Well, what happened? A funny thing happened on the way to firing Torrey and firing Cashman. Throw out, get rid of all the scouts, and George's got to sell a team to what? To an owner who wants to win. That's very important, because I guess most owners don't want to win. They just buy teams to throw money away and not win. You go back to the 90s, the number of times that either Yankee fans or Met fans called to bitch about their team, we need to sell it to an owner who wants to win. As if George Steinbrenner didn't want to win. As if my cousin Steve, right, Cohen, as if he doesn't want to win. As if he hasn't put his money where his mouth was. Outspent everybody to get Juan Soto. But here's the irony. 1998 New York Yankees, after starting 1-4, went berserk. And for the rest of the season, with the mild exception of they had a little bit of a slump where I think they lost 6 out of 9 or 6 out of 8. And they lost a terrible game to the then Tampa Bay Devil Rays, with the worst team in baseball. But that was a rare season where the Yankees just ran right through. They ran right through the American League and interleague play, and they ended up at 114 wins. They had almost no down moments after the 1-4 where we have to clean house. Everyone's got to fucking go. I hate Chili Davis. Well, Chili Davis ended up hurting his foot. He wasn't a factor. Pettit sucks. Mariano's not a closer. David Cohn is overrated. He's not that good anymore. David Wells is out of shape. You hear it all when you're 1-4. But that team 114-48. Had some tough moments against Cleveland in the championship series and swept the Padres. But that is the exception to the rule. It's not the exception that proves the rule. That is the exception to the rule. That in a long season, you might have enormous stretches where you are incompetent. But what gets me about fans, and I really hope that I didn't do this. I don't think that I was as negative, despite being a very pessimistic sports fan in general for most of my life. I don't think that I did this. I certainly didn't boo people in person and, call up WFAN demanding people be fired. But there's a thing with fans that even when the team is doing great, when it's nothing but sunshine and rainbows, in the immortal words of Wesley Snipes' Blade, it's sunshine and rainbows. But what do we do as fans? We call WFAN or we post on message boards about the one thing that's wrong or the two things that are wrong. So the Mets this year, they're now 76-73. I think they're 76-73 now. They were 45-24 after 69 games. I'm going to put on my dear old dad CPA cap. If they're 76-73 now, and they were 45-24 then, it means that in the last half of a season, they have gone 31-50 or 30-49. Like, this is epic. They have played like a 100-loss team for just about half the season. 31-49 in 80 games. But here's the thing, and it pissed me off at the time. This is not Monday morning, I hate the Mets quarterbacking. When they were 45-24, they looked like they were going to run away with the National League East. Mets fans were preoccupied with the fact that Juan Soto was not doing as well as he had with the Yankees last year. That's what they wanted to talk about. They didn't want to, hey, this is fantastic. We're 21 games over. We're playing better than the Yanks, and they spend a lot of money. They have a big team. No. Newspaper columns. What's wrong with Juan Soto? And then the ridiculous thing on the talk radio or sports, some saying, I don't think he's really 26. Hey, get the fuck out of here. I mean, give me a break. Every team had access to the man's birth certificate. Don't start stupid shit like, I wonder if he's really 26. He's whatever his fucking birth certificate says. Come on, please, be serious. Be serious. And that's why he's playing poorly. Cross my fingers. Aaron Judge is 33. Okay? You could be 28. Soto could have been 30. He could still play. It has nothing to do with the price of anything anywhere. All of the complaining about Juan Soto when the team is running away with the division and looked like one of the certainly top couple of teams in all of baseball. Lindor, tremendous. Edwin Diaz, right? Alonso, good that they got him back. And then all of a sudden, they start losing and losing and losing and losing and losing. And there have not been too many, let's say, 10-game stretches since they were 45-24 where they've gone even 7-3. I'm not sure that they certainly don't have any 8-2s. But it's just been a never-ending cascade of negativity in Mets land. The thing is, though, it's baseball, Susan. It's still baseball. So as incompetent as they have been, playing half the season like the 1980 Joe Torre Mets, I don't even know if they lose 100. They were close. That was not a good team. But they are still in position with 17 games to go or whatever the exact amount. They still control their own destiny for the wild card. And, there's a lot of laughs on social media. I was just looking at X and some other apps. And it was a guy, I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. But somebody posted, it was a picture of the Mets having just lost today and looking very, very forlorn on the bench. And the tweet was, Mets officially eliminated from playoff contention. Now, I shouldn't laugh, but that's funny because there are some people that are going to look at that and go, how are they eliminated? They're not. They're not. It feels like they are because they just lost their 8th game in a row. And about a week and a half ago, it seemed that they were turning it around. And then they just ran into another brick wall. Yeah, they've had some injuries, but everybody has injuries. It's looking bad. Just get to the postseason. You got to win a couple of games here. You got to have a 7-3 stretch at some point to kind of ensure that you get the. I mean, they're fortunate there are this many wild cards. 30 years ago, the story that I told not that far back in the podcast a couple of weeks ago, where the 1995 Yankees with 31 games left were buried. That was a wild card race. There was only one wild card for the entire American League. You didn't have multiple. We got the best of 3 and the best of 5 and who has the home field. Now it's a lot easier. There will not be another 90-win team doesn't get some form of a postseason series. It can't happen. You would have to have something totally ridiculous like 300 lost teams and 4 teams with more than 90. But it doesn't work that way. There's too much parity. They need to win some games. And if they sneak in, anything can happen. Anything can happen because the Mets last year, down the stretch, they struggled a lot and they almost made it to the World Series. So you get to the big dance, you get into the tournament, and you roll the dice and you take your chances because some of those Yankees teams which won the World Series were not very good. The 2000 Yankees were an 87-win team. That was a very pedestrian team. They lost 15 of the last 18 games, and they didn't just lose. They got tuned up. At least the Mets, they've lost games. They're being competitive. The 2000 Yankees in the last 3 weeks of the season were losing by 8 runs every game. I'm only exaggerating by a little. You can't believe what the scores were. And I remember, going into September, well, maybe this Yankee team, they'll win 100. Yeah, go fuck yourself. Win 100? Win 100. They won 87. In other years, they're beaten out of sight. They were lucky. They were fortunate. They got into the postseason, and they had played way worse than they should have, given the talent level, which was still considerable. They got hot at the right time, and they won their 4th World Series in 5 years. You just have to get there. So we're hanging crepe about how terrible the Mets are, and Met fans despairing. I don't blame them. But the season isn't over. It's not over. You get to the postseason, and anything is possible. When you have skilled players like Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, magic can happen. Soto could have a 5-game series where he hits 5 home runs. It's not that crazy. Think about how great he was last year with the Yankees. He practically won the Cleveland series single-handedly. He's capable. Yeah, statistically, he hasn't quite had the season that he had last year, but last year I think was kind of a career year for him. He was as good as Judge. Now, I understand he doesn't play the outfield, typically as well as Judge, who, he made the error in the World Series, but I mean, those kinds of plays happen. What are you going to do? But Juan Soto in every other department with the Yankees last year was every bit the player of Aaron Judge. And that is, there was a point in Aaron Judge's career where saying he was as good as Juan Soto was a compliment to Judge. Saying that Juan Soto played basically the equal of Judge in 2024, that's a compliment to Soto. Because Judge is now ridiculous. He's fucking Joe DiMaggio here. Not literally, sorry. But that's what he's doing. DiMaggio was a 5-tool player. I guess Mickey Mantle skill set wise was closer to Judge than DiMaggio because DiMaggio didn't strike out. DiMaggio was the unicorn of unicorns, guy hitting, he had almost as many home runs in his career as strikeouts. Like, that's not normal. You're not supposed to do that. 630 some plate appearances in 1941. DiMaggio struck out 13 times. Like, you say to yourself, how is this real? He had 30 homers and he struck out 13 times. What? Guys, Bob Feller's out there throwing 100 miles an hour. It's like batting practice for DiMaggio. But that's how good Aaron Judge is. He's now a peer of all of the exalted Yankees names. And if Juan Soto is a half a step below, he is still a phenomenal baseball player. And that's the kind of guy that can put a team on his back in the postseason. We saw it as Yankee fans with A-Rod in 2009, all of the nonsense with the drugs and everything. A-Rod was tremendous. And Reggie Jackson in 1977 statistically had a big year for the Yankees, but he's not a true Yankee. He's a me player. The Yankees are supposed to be a team. It's always the same shit, just different names of players. Right? Not everybody is meant to be Derek Jeter. Not everybody's meant to be Aaron Judge or Don Mattingly or that kind of team-first mindset. Because we don't know what goes on between the ears with people. There is something to be said for the public face. And the way Derek Jeter was always very careful about what he shared with reporters, because he never wanted to give the other team bulletin board material, which is more like, tablet material now, but it's the same idea. But just for perspective also. Now, I've been ragging on the Mets because they have, and the numbers don't lie. I'm not, just going off on them because of my lifelong hatred, which it's not really hatred anymore. It's different. When you're a kid and you're the last remaining Yankee fan in junior high school, and you've got all these bandwagon jumping clowns who were Yankee fans, and then suddenly, because they didn't want to be different, I guess, oh yeah, I always liked the Mets. Go fuck yourself. No, you've been a Yankee fan. You're full of shit. Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder. Go fuck yourself. That's what it was like. I'm sorry for my cat. He's not really. Sheldon, are you a baseball fan? No. But just so you understand, I'm only talking numbers. And there's no delight, there is no happiness, there is no joy because the Mets have fallen on hard times. But now, the Mets were playing better than the Yankees at the high water mark. I mentioned 45-24. So at a very similar point in the season, the Yankees were 42-25. Now that's 67 games. So the Mets at their peak were 21 over 500. The Yankees were 17 over 500. Important to note this. So the Yanks were 17 over 500. Now, the Yanks had a nice rally. They've played pretty well for the last little over a month. They're 83-65. And if they play 500 ball the rest of the way, they get to 90 wins. Again, it's a barometer. It doesn't really mean anything. Some years that's going to win a division for you. Other years you're going to be in a wild card, and hopefully you're not in a best of 3 kind of a situation. You get right to the best of 5 or best of 7 series. But 83-65 is fine. But for the Yankees to go from 42-25 to 83-65, that means the Yankees have played basically 500 ball for half the season. They're 41-40. They're 41-40 in the last 81 games. They're not blowing up anybody's skirt, in the immortal words of Charlton Heston in True Lights. Like, that's shit. That's terrible. If you start the season at 41-40 and you go into the All-Star break a game over 500, you suck. You need to rethink your entire organizational process. The Mets can just start winning. You get a couple of games, because the what they did here, and I joked around here on the podcast and talked about it with friends, since the Yankees fell apart in June, I've been telling everybody they're going to go 15-5 at some point. I just had it in my head it was going to be 15, but they're going to go 15-5. It's inevitable. It's baseball. This is a better roster than they started the season with. They're going to have a stretch. Now, they didn't quite get to 15-5. They were 13-3, and then they lost a couple of games, but they have played pretty well since kind of bottoming out at, I guess, about 5 games over 500. But it is a sport, a game of streaks and slumps. And sometimes the slumps extend far longer than you would expect that you can tolerate. Now, I mentioned how I felt that a lot of Mets fans and a lot of media in general, not just fans, journalists, reporters, people, doing stuff on the internet, just, their own corner of the internet, as opposed to actually writing for a physical publication, a physical media like an actual newspaper, felt they were coming down too hard on Juan Soto. The team's playing well. Be happy. Be happy. You're 21 over 500. You're on pace to win 105 to 110 games. Just focus on the good. You don't need to complain that Soto's not hitting as well as he did with the Yankees. He misses the Yankees. Maybe he did. But he's going to end up with ridiculous power numbers. And he's had his moments. He's had some big hits, some big home runs. 3 years ago, in 2022, the Yankees, going into the second half of the season, they were on pace to win like 115 games. Okay? They had a problem, though, because their right fielder, left fielder, he bounced back and forth, Joey Gallo. And I don't mean my cousin Vinny. Joey Gallo's dead. No, Joey Gallo, the baseball player. He wasn't playing well. And he was still at an age, I think he was 29 or 30. He should have been in his prime. This was a guy who was a 40 home run type of an offensive player. He was playing terrible offensively. He had a couple of home runs, but he was batting under 200. And you would have thought that he was holding the Yankees back. They're on pace for 115 plus wins. The record at their high water mark was something like 61-33 or 61-34, just almost 1998 Yankee level shit, like crazy stuff. It may have even been better than that. But they had well over double wins to losses. This I remember. But if you listened to the drumbeat of the pulse of Yankee fans, you would have thought that Joey Gallo was single-handedly ruining the season. You wouldn't even know that they were so many games over 500 with 60 or 70 to play. So what the Yanks ended up doing, they traded Joey Gallo and rejoicing, this is the greatest thing ever. And what happened? The 2022 Yankees fucking nosedived. They nosedived. And they ended up not even getting to 100 wins. They had a stretch of a month. They went something like 10-23, more than a month. So they hit an inevitable rough patch. It had nothing to do with Joey Gallo. Juan Soto wasn't keeping the Mets from being even greater. It's baseball. It's 25 people on a team. You go up, you go down. But the way that the postseason is structured, none of this shit makes any difference. Just as the Mets swooned towards the end of the season last year in 2024, when they won that thrilling series against the Brewers, none of that made any difference. When it looked like they had a chance to challenge and maybe even defeat the Dodgers, the September swoon, the fact that they played poorly in August, the fact that they lost some really bad games, doesn't make any difference. You have the opportunity, you win, you get to the postseason, starts fresh. You just go out there and play good baseball. We know they're capable. 45-24, just as it's not a coincidence or a fluke that they played this bad, the 45-24 is not a fluke. 21 games over 500 that early in the season, on pace for 106 to 110 wins, that's not a fluke either. They just all seem to hit a bad stretch, and they haven't been able to pull themselves out. But every time they win a couple of games, they lose another couple of games. But it happened to the Yankees of 2022, and it happened to the Yankees this year. And this is something that used to drive me nuts. I know I love the guy, John Sterling. Maybe he'll come back for the postseason again this year. I thought he did a pretty good job last year calling the games in the postseason because he had retired earlier in the season. But John Sterling used to do this thing, drove me nuts. And think of it this way. If when the Mets were 45-24, or when the Yanks were 42-25, John Sterling was the kind of person who, when a team broke out to a big rush at the beginning of the season where they piled up a lot of wins and a division lead, he would always say stuff like, to his partner, Susan Waldman, Susan, with 100 games to go in the season, the Yankees are 42-20. Do you know what that means, Susan? What does it mean, John? It means that if this Yankees team just plays 500 ball for the rest of the season, the last 100 games, if they just play 500 ball, Susan, they'll win 92 games. All right, good. He could do math. 42-20, 92-70. So, if the 2025 Mets, 45-24, if they had just played 500 baseball the rest of the way, they would have won either 91 or 92 games. But baseball doesn't work like that. And the other thing that Sterling would say, he would almost mockingly go, well, and we know the Yankees are better than a 500 team. Yeah, no shit. But that doesn't take into account the peaks and valleys of a baseball season, unlike any other sport. They don't allow for that. You just speak in platitudes and, well, this couldn't happen. Well, yeah, it can. Now, I would not have expected the Yankees to basically play like a 500 team for half the season. And it took, as I say, this recent really good stretch of solid baseball just to get to the 500 for the half the season. Nobody could have predicted that the Mets were going to play like a 100-loss team. It's the way it goes. You would rather be where they are right now than if they had continued to tear it up and they win 105 games and then lose in the first round of the playoffs. Lose a brutal series. They're still in play. It just takes a couple of games. You start to get the confidence back. You start thinking, like they used to say, Tug McGraw in 1973, you got to believe. And the irony with that is he was pissed off. It was a similar concept to Thurman Munson inadvertently giving Reggie Jackson one of the most famous names in the history of sports nicknames, Mr. October. Thurman was trying to rip on Reggie. He was implying that Reggie only tried, that Reggie was capable of being a better player, but he only brought his A-plus game in October. He's Mr. October. When Tug McGraw said you got to believe, he was fucking around. But it ended up being the rallying cry for the 73 Mets, which were not a very good team. They were 82-79. That is a very shitty record. You don't need me to tell you that. They were just better than a 500 team for the whole season, but they came within a hair's breadth of winning the 73 World Series. They lost to the Oakland A's, who were in the midst of their 3-episode arc of winning the World Series in 1972, 73, and 74. All seems lost for the Mets. And hey, a month ago, there were Yankee fans giving up the ghost. Again, the season's over. Hal Steinbrenner's got to sell the team. Cashman's got to go. Boone's got to go. You got to get rid of this pitcher, that pitcher, this pitcher, that pitcher. Rodon has a bad outing. He sucks. He's a bum. Devin Williams, right? The worst pitcher in history. Well, Devin Williams is still throwing 97 with movement. His command has been the issue. There's nothing wrong with the guy's arm. Sometimes you see pitchers, they lose a little off their fastball and they can't locate. Williams is throwing bullets up there. Sometimes command, it's a touch thing. You just lose it a little bit. But we will see. In the next 3 weeks, are the Mets going to completely collapse? Because at this point, not making the postseason would qualify as an enormous collapse with all of the extra playoff teams relative to how they did it at the beginning of the wild card in the year of the 1995 Yankees' miraculous rally to the postseason to salvage something out of what had been a lost 14 years of baseball since the disastrous 1981 World Series. I think the Mets are going to end up making the postseason. I'm not jinxing them. I'm not talking shit. And I would sign up. Hey, give me a Subway Series right now. I'll go so far as to say I'll even give the Mets game 1. That's how badly and how much it would be great for New York if we would get a Subway Series this year. But we'll just have to see. And that's the beauty of baseball. You can't figure it. You just can't figure it. Sometimes it follows certain patterns, but other times shit happens. You got to play the games. And the season's not over until the 162nd game has been played. So here we are at the close of baseball business on Saturday, September 3rd, 2025. The Yankees are in pretty good position to get the top wild card slot. They're 3 games behind Toronto. Toronto has a real tough last 2 weeks of the season. The Yankees are playing mostly patsies. We'll just have to see. They got to get a little closer. They have to be within 2 games with like 10 to go. Then they'll have a shot. The Mets just need to win. You just need to have a stretch. You win 6 out of 8, something like that, to solidify. And you start thinking, no, we're going to make it. We've played so badly for so long. The 45-24 was not a fluke, but we're going to find out. Maybe it was. Maybe it was the longest term mirage where a 100-loss team somehow played like a 105-win team for 40-some% of the season. But I love baseball. I maintain that it is the best. If you're a big baseball fan, as Sheldon is not, baseball is still the best fan sport with the most tension. And I feel like the celebrations are more intense too. Right, Sheldon? Anyway, I'm going to keep him here for the wrap up. This has been episode, I don't even remember what episode. Do you remember? He doesn't remember. We'll just have to call this a non-numbered episode of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Saturday evening here with me in New York. A lighthearted, baseball-themed episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.